Welcome, Pewter Report readers, viewers, and listeners to a brand new edition of the Pewter Report podcast, brought to you by our friends over at Briar Greaves Insurance. Protecting your assets starts with a company that you can count on. So whether that's auto, homeowners, flood boaters, or business insurance, there's nobody better in the business to work with than the great people over at Briar Greaves Insurance. For more information about them, visit their website, briargreavesinsurance.com, or you can give them a call at 813-876-4166. That's 813-876-4166. It is a Tuesday edition of the Pewter Report podcast as we are back to our off-season podcast schedule. So we will have shows every Tuesday, Monday through Thursday, and then, of course, our Pewter Insider on Friday. And with the offseason continuing, we're going to talk a little bit more about this Bucs offensive coordinator coaching search, some updates there, and take a look at the Bucs salary cap situation in 2026. What's it at now? How can they get more? Will there be contract extensions on the way? And, of course, we'll answer any questions, comments, and super chats that we get to on this show. And we have a very revered guest to help us with all of the salary cap information. I'm your host, Matt Matera. Joining with me, it is my distinct honor to have back on the show our cash guy, cap guru, Josh Queipo is with us this afternoon. I'm fired up. Josh, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. How are you doing, my friend?
Matt, I am doing fantastic. How about yourself, buddy?
Doing even better now that I'm talking to you. And I got to give a shout out to our guy, Jay Retcher. He was on the show yesterday, also runs the Jay Retcher show. I believe you've been on before. He was calling you Cash Queipo or Cash Money Queipo. I'm kind of liking that nickname. So Cash Money Queipo is with us this afternoon, which is always a great thing to see. Josh, before we kind of get into all the details and the finances, I mean, what an offseason it's been already for Tampa Bay. Just kind of give me your thoughts now that we're a couple of weeks removed from the season. Let's start with Todd Bowles. Do you agree with the Bucs' decision to stay with Todd Bowles as head coach? And what do you think about some of these offensive coordinator interviews that have either already happened or are happening within the next day or two?
Yeah, starting with Bowles, I mentioned this with our old buddy John Ledyard not too long ago. I think I'm one of two people who supported the decision to keep him, and I don't think the other person was his mother. So I know I'm quite in the minority on that one. But I'll be very, very specific in terms of why I was okay with them keeping Bowles. Number one, I can see Todd Bowles' vision for defense, and I know a lot of people are going to probably quickly trash that. You know, what is it? Soft cover. What he strives to create, I see that vision. I love that vision, and I love the creativity that he brings to defenses. So that's number one. Number two, for everybody talking about he lost the locker room, I really don't think that he did. Just in terms of hearing the players in the postseason wrap-ups, they never once during the season got to the point where they were calling each other out. It was still a cohesive locker room from what I saw. And so I still think that from that perspective, as a leader of men, he still has the locker room. And so for those two reasons, when you consider the context of what he had to deal with this season, I support giving him one more chance. One more. Like, this is it. You gotta make that NFC Championship game no matter what the context is next year. But I was okay with keeping him. And I understand that is an unpopular opinion among Bucs watchers. Now, to the offensive coordinators, I think the best name to interview so far was the one that's most recently been reported, which is Todd Monken, former offensive coordinator for the Bucs, offensive coordinator for the Ravens last year. I think what he could do with this offensive line, with the run game, I think he brings a ton of creativity, and he's been shown to really tailor his offenses to his personnel. I think that he could be a phenomenal hire. What I also think from a Todd Bowles perspective, he could be the Josh McDaniels to Mike Vrabel, which is in this day and age, one of the most important things you have to have in place is a strong offensive mind to run your offense. And if your head coach isn't that guy, then he needs to find somebody who's going to most likely be stable with the organization and not a one and done, like a Dave Canales, like a Liam Cohen. So I think Monken checks a lot of boxes that could work for the team, could work for helping Bowles specifically. So I think that that's probably the best name so far. Zach Robinson's a really interesting one. I know a lot of people are nonplussed by Robinson because Atlanta's offense seemed to underperform the talent outside of the 2 games a year they played Tampa Bay. But I do think that Robinson was given a bit of a raw deal in terms of the quarterbacks that he had to work with over the last 2 years. Kirk in 2024, coming back from the Achilles, there was no mobility to him. Michael Penix turned out to not be able to work under center. And so Zach Robinson just became like a pistol offensive coordinator. And I don't think that was by design. I think it was him adjusting to what he had under or behind center. So I'd be interested to see what Robinson can do with a much more applicable quarterback, somebody who you can do almost anything with Baker. So I would be interested to see Robinson in that regard. I think those are the 2 most notable names so far. Kafka, it was interesting what he did with the Giants last year. Very explosive, but not. They failed to stay on schedule. This was a team that was 12th in EPA per play, but 23rd when he was calling the plays after they let go of Dayball in success rate, which means you had a lot of like first down didn't work, second down didn't work, third down we gained 15 yards. And I don't know if that's something that I really want to sign up for if I'm the Bucs.
Understood. Yeah, context is so important when it comes to a lot of this. Like, I think you make a lot of great points about Zach Robinson, not even just with Kirk Cousins and what you just said about Michael Penix Jr., but Penix also is a very injury-prone guy. I mean, he had a ton of injuries back in Indiana before he even went to Washington and took them to a national championship game before Michigan. And now he's not in Atlanta, so I guess it's kind of a moot point in that standpoint. There's obviously another big name that is out there, and that's Mike McDaniel. Now, he's looking for head coaching jobs as well before he's going to look at offensive coordinator, although it is reported that he's going to meet with the Detroit Lions after interviewing with some of these head coaching opportunities. And there's one more head coaching vacancy now with Mike Tomlin telling the Steelers that he is going to be stepping down after 19 seasons as Pittsburgh's head coach. Well, so let me ask you, you already said you're in favor of Monken. Are you in favor of him more than Mike McDaniel? Or out of those 2, who would you rather have calling the plays for the Bucs?
Ooh, from my limited perspective, I would go McDaniel. Now, with that, though, you're probably signing up for somebody who, if the team is successful, and obviously that means the offense is successful, he's probably moving on in a year into another head coaching role. But just strictly from who can get the most out of the offense, I see McDaniel as an uber genius who can take what he did in Miami. I think is so special that he came in and he had a very, very limited quarterback, and he was able to sell the organization on a vision to maximize that quarterback. And for a while, Tua was one of the most efficient and explosive quarterbacks in the NFL, despite his individual limitations. That was all, a byproduct of what McDaniel was able to build around him. And that to me is really special. And I hear a lot of people go, well, that doesn't fit, what McDaniel did in Miami, his scheme doesn't work for the Bucs. I'll push back on that. That scheme was tailor-made for that situation. And I don't think that he is beholden to what he did there at all. I think what he would say is I think he's very good at tailoring what he's going to do around the talent he has. So the best things that they did in Miami that he thinks that the talent in Tampa Bay can do, absolutely, he's going to do that. But you're out of your mind if you think he's going to use Mike Evans like he used Tyreek Hill. It's just not going to happen. He's going to say it's a different receiver. I'm going to use him differently, and I'm going to play to his strengths, which are different than the strengths of Tyreek. And I think that could be really, really special. Long term, again, I think Monken's real trump card over almost every one of these other guys is I don't see him as somebody who's looking for or going to be looked at as a long-term head coach in other situations.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Monken's obviously older than a lot of these candidates, has only been a head coach at the college football level. So it does kind of seem like it is interesting because, like, Bruce Arians, it took a while before he became a head coach and did a great job with it. But every situation is certainly different. By the way, we got some shout outs from people in the comments. Obviously, loving that Josh is on the show. Hezo813 says Matty Diamonds and Josh Queipo with the fire emojis. Yeah, we had some fun doing the Pewter Game Day show the previous season. It's a good it was a good combination of me losing my mind, me freaking out on bets, Josh actually giving like important football knowledge and stuff like that. So there's a saying on the show, part of my take. It's called idiot jazz. It's like when we're just riffing and stuff like that. I mean, it's in a positive way. We had a little bit of like idiot jazz during
my favorite parts of those broadcasts were you're so great at pop culture references. And I always felt like I was rolling the dice on whether I was going to catch it or not. And when I did, just pure joy from me.
Dude, it's so funny you say that because I feel like this is relevant to football fans and stuff like that, but I'll make it quick. New Year's Eve, I'm out to dinner with some family friends, and like their kids were there, and people were around our age, and the restaurant, it was a nice restaurant. It was buffet style, and there's some crab legs, and these people that I'm meeting for the first time, he's like, hey, like, we're going to get the crab legs. We're going to do crab legs. And I'm like, yes, no better way to honor Jameis Winston than with crab legs. And the guy had no idea what I was talking about. He wasn't a big sports fan. He wasn't a football fan. He just went, oh, he's like, yeah, that went over my head. I'm like, oh God, we're in for a rough night. But it ended up being fine. But
that's amazing.
I came out of the gates. These people don't know me. I make a Jameis Winston crab leg joke, and they did not know what I was talking about. So I was kind of like the Bucs running on first down a lot. I was already playing behind the chains as the night went on, but it went totally fine. Sticking with the whole coach situation, Mike McDaniel did interview with the Atlanta Falcons, and it looks like that John Harbaugh is interested in the Atlanta Falcons. So this is a little bit of a different viewpoint.
Yeah.
But who should the Bucs worry about more? John Harbaugh coaching the Falcons or Mike McDaniel?
Ooh.
Yeah, I'm just throwing you everything today.
Yeah. I'll say Harbaugh. Harbaugh's proven to get them, the most out of his rosters and consistently puts them in position to be in the playoffs. The proven track record there. I think if you're talking about competing for division titles, Harbaugh is going to be the one that I think the Bucs would worry more about.
Yeah, I think that's fair for sure. GM Reynolds says, "Hail Queipo, full of finance," and Gangster Rib says, finally, someone that understands football. Agreed, Josh. Bowles has not been given the opportunity to separate himself from BA's original staff. We also have not invested on defense since 2020, minus Cansey. Before we get into more of the salary cap type of conversation, just one last thing on Todd Bowles. Since he is going to be back, what needs to change, whether it's just on the defense, whether it's from Todd Bowles philosophically? Like, what do you need to see different from the Bucs in 2026, besides just like obviously winning more games and reaching the postseason again?
Yeah, philosophically, what I was hoping for. So I think that the changes on the defensive side of the ball were warranted. I probably would have gone even further in terms of who I would have changed on that side of the ball. But what I was hoping for that it doesn't look like Bowles is doing, what Raheem Morris did in Atlanta last year in recruiting Jeff Ulbrich to be his defensive coordinator, the two of them having very different philosophies on how they saw football, but being able to marry that and collaborate so well Atlanta was one of the best defenses in the NFL down the stretch, and they were doing some really interesting things. So for those fans who aren't really up on the two ideas, what's interesting is the evolution of Raheem Morris as a defensive mind coming out of Tampa Bay, the old Tampa 2, right? But then as he went to all these different stops, ending up in Los Angeles with the Rams, he eventually morphed into somebody who did like to bring a lot of pressure, who did bring second level defenders and liked to blitz nickels and safeties, and really got into that world of heavy pressure sim philosophies. Jeff Ulbrich came from Robert Saleh, right, from San Francisco and the Jets, and they were one of the best 4-down-and-go defenses for a while there, and that was really his world. He didn't do a lot of the high pressure stuff, and so the two of them, when they got married together last year, the collaboration was really, really interesting because you would see parts of both of them, and that defense was really good down the stretch. I wanted Bowles to go and seek out somebody like an Ulbrich, somebody who saw defense from a different perspective and could collaborate with him to evolve the Bucs defense. It does not look like he's going to do that. And that does worry me to a certain degree, because I think that could really help round out his rough edges philosophically. So that's really what I was hoping for. And obviously he has to nail the offensive coordinator hire. That's probably going to be the most important move of the offseason, even more so than the roster moves.
I'm a huge fan of Jeff Ulbrich, not just because of his ties to the Jets, but I don't know. I find great fascination in coaches that can find success on different teams. Now, it's one thing to say, oh, well, you're going from team to team. Like, I guess you got fired from like your last situation. And that's why context is important to everything. But Ulbrich was great with the Jets being their defensive coordinator. He was calling the plays too. And like Robert Saleh was the walk around type of head coach. And then what he did in Atlanta this most recent season, especially the second half of the year, relying on his guys, creating turnovers. I mean, Xavier Watts had an unreal season as a rookie. But yeah, I don't know. To me, there's just something about coaches that find ways to have success going to different stops. Like, I think that's what I respect a lot about Jim Harbaugh, is that the dude just wins no matter where he went, whether it was San Fran, going back to Michigan. Obviously, there's a lot of scandal there, but like going with the Chargers, winning a lot. Bill Parcells, everywhere he went, he was either in a Super Bowl, competing for one, or going to the postseason year after year. So I always find that fascinating with coaches and finding success in different ways. And I think that's appealing to Todd Monken as well, given the fact that he was with the Bucs the first time around. Was awesome at Georgia as their offensive coordinator. Spent some time in Cleveland. I know he wasn't always calling the plays, but helped Lamar Jackson get an MVP. I really do think that the Bucs need a seasoned guy for offensive coordinator this time around. I mean, sometimes the risks are great. I mean, Liam Cohen, everybody wants the next Liam Cohen, but sometimes it backfires. And I don't even blame. Obviously, Josh Queipo gets some blame, but I think in other seasons, he's probably still back as the offensive coordinator, but Todd Bowles needed a fall guy. But yeah, I think kind of an experienced play caller is probably the better way to go for Tampa Bay in this offensive coordinator search this time around.
Yeah, it's interesting. Following Liam Cohen's a lot different than following Byron Leftwich in terms of the perspective fans have on you.
That is very true, and we have a very passionate group as well. Wanted to get to another comment. What's Buckin says, is Todd Monken the only offensive coordinator that we interviewed in person? So he's going to interview with them tomorrow, and I believe so. He'll be the first in person. Everything else has been virtually for Tampa Bay. Now it is still early in the process. I imagine we're going to see more names, and some of these virtual interviews will then turn into in-person interviews and stuff like that. But yeah, Todd Monken will be the first in-person interview for Tampa Bay, which will be very interesting. But let's talk dollars and cents, Josh. Actually, before the finance itself, I do want to talk about Jason Licht. In your opinion, obviously Bowles has been getting thrashed this entire offseason at the end of the season for everything that went wrong with this team. Some people have talked about that Jason Licht deserves some blame as well. How much of a role do you think Jason kind of played in whether it was just not being aggressive at the trade deadline, not being aggressive before the start of the season, trying to bring in more guys, and maybe relying on the draft too much versus trading for an instantly proven player, or, maybe not. I don't think it was a bad draft by any means, but like their last Pro Bowl players drafted were Tristan Wirfs and Antoine Winfield Jr. What are your thoughts on like Jason Licht and kind of the performance that he's had this season and kind of in recent years?
Yeah, I think the drafts continue to be good, right? Like you look at this last draft, Emeka Egbuka, second best receiver in among rookies this year, and certainly carried the Bucs offense for a little while there with Baker, and was, for all the talk about him being a luxury pick, they ended up needing him based on the injuries to Chris Godwin and Mike Evans and Jalen McMillan. So, and the outlook certainly is very bright on him. Jacob Parrish had a fantastic rookie season. Benjamin Morrison, up and down. Obviously, the downs were very high profile, but on the whole, I thought it was a solid rookie season from him, and it ended on a high note. So, and then Elijah Roberts, nobody expected him. The Bucs coaching staff certainly didn't expect him to have to play that big of a role. And, there were flashes with him from a 5th round guy. He can pressure the quarterback, right? I still got to work on his run defense. Double teams really hurt him throughout the year. So there's a lot of work to be done, but that's a solid draft class. And it pairs with a lot of solid draft classes. Now, from those draft classes, has there born a superstar since the Tristan and Antoine one? Not a superstar, right? Like Yaya's on the cusp if he can finish a few more sacks. And then Cody Mauch, I thought, was on the cusp as well before his season-ending injury right at the beginning of the season. Yeah. But it's fair to say that Jason hasn't found superstars to this point. The trade deadline, I struggle with that one because we didn't see linebackers get traded, right? Like, correct. We saw a couple of edge rushers, Odafe Owe and Jalen Phillips did get traded. But this is where I differ with a lot of people on what the Bucs need to improve their pass rush. I don't think there are a lot of edge rushers who would have created a huge difference in their sack totals, because the Bucs had one of the fastest get-offs and one of the fastest time to pressures last year and still couldn't finish those sacks. And for me, it's the lack of athleticism at the linebacker position. Every quarterback they faced had one of their fastest time to throws of the season, because they knew, if I can just get the ball out fast, I can beat the pass rush, and I'm going to beat the linebackers to the windows they're supposed to close. Levante David, love him. The athleticism was lacking last year. Servassier Dennis, we covered it extensively, the lack of athleticism in space and being able to cover. So those were easily manipulated, easy pickups. So that's where I think that the roster really needs a lot of change, and where the big miss was at the linebacker position. Is it fair to criticize Jason Licht in terms of that was the linebacker plan they had? I think that's probably fair game overall, just based on what we know externally. So if Servassier Dennis is the worst linebacker in the NFL over the first 6 to 7 seasons, and you don't have anybody behind him, you feel comfortable saying, let's throw something out there because it can't be worse, then the linebacker room was lacking, and it should have been addressed better.
Yeah, for sure. It seemed like their big option after Levante and Servassier was going to be Anthony Walker Jr., and then he didn't even practice in training camp and then didn't make the team. So you had Deion Jones, but as we all know, Deion Jones isn't a long-term answer for this team. And then you had John Bullock, who, I mean, his biggest contribution to the team was the personal foul penalty late in the season that didn't help. And, Nick Jackson, cool story, trying to fight and make the team and makes the practice squad and eventually gets called up. But, I mean, realistically, he's going to be in the same situation again this year, trying to make the last spot on the active roster, if not just kind of be on the practice squad and get called up here or there. So, yeah, I'm with you. I mean, inside linebacker and having like a true alpha edge rusher, to me, are like the two biggest things on this entire team that they need, let alone just like on helping the defensive side. And you had a great write-up about Sonny Styles and, the likelihood that he could be going to Tampa Bay. We can kind of talk about that a little bit later. Why do you make that face?
Best linebacker I've scouted coming out of college. Now I haven't been doing it for very long, just a few years, but man, I love Sonny Styles.
And you're getting a lot of love for the article, as you should. So definitely recommend to everybody, if you haven't seen that article yet, check it out after the show once we finish up. But we still got a ways to go on this show. Let's talk dollars and cents now with Jason Licht, Mike Greenberg, Jackie Davidson. It's a busy offseason every year, but given how this 8-9 season went, first time not making the postseason in 6 seasons, they had 5 in a row. There's got to be some change, or just, I believe, some tweaks and adjustments in how they go about kind of building the team this year. So let's start it off, since you are our money guy, our cap guru, Josh Queipo. What are the Bucs working with in 2026 in terms of what do they have right now with the salary cap? Is it better now than it has been in other years at this time?
Yeah, they're fine in terms of the salary cap. Over the cap has them projected for about $25 million in cap space to start the offseason. And that's without them touching any contracts. That will be more than enough for them to sign their draft class and to make some additions. But what I've been trying to do is just educate people. It's not about the cap. The Bucs can create all sorts of cap room in 2026 if they wanted to. They could restructure Baker Mayfield's contract and open up $20 million. They could restructure Vita Vea's contract and open up $8 million in cap space. Chris Godwin and Tristan Wirfs combined is another 34 plus. Antoine Winfield Jr. another 14. So cap space is not something that they are lacking in terms of what they can do. They are not going to do all of those moves. They don't need to do all of those moves. What I'm hoping to get people to realize is teams don't make decisions on the cap space. They make decisions based on the cash outlays, or how much cash they're actually going to spend that season. Okay. And to give just a real simple example, we'll use a signing bonus. You sign a guy and you give him a $10 million signing bonus over 4 years. Right. So from a cap perspective, it's accounted for $2.5 million in each of those 4 years. But ownership has to pay $10 million in year one. Okay. And that's what owners care about. How much money am I actually going to spend this year? And they actually give their operations departments a budget. This is how much I'm willing to spend in real hard cash this year. And with that, now, those numbers are not public because teams can make their own decisions. The only rule that really stands is that over specific multi-year periods, teams have to meet a certain spending threshold. The current window that we're in is 2024 to 2026, and teams have to spend 90% of the salary cap over that 3-year period total. And the Bucs are going to easily meet that. But we can look at the long-term spending habits of the Bucs and get an idea of where they like to have their spending budget. And they typically tie it to the salary cap. So with that said, we don't know what the 2026 salary cap is going to be, but we can estimate it. My current estimation is it's going to land around $305 million, which means that the Bucs will have about $300 to $305 million in cash to spend. Based on the players they already have on their roster, it's about $225 million already committed. So now you're left with $75 to $80 million needed. Then you have their draft class that they have to pay. And that will be, I'm trying to remember where I had it, based on their current picks, that's going to be about another $30 million. So now you're working with about $45 to $50 million in cash that they can use for any of their own players who are about to be free agents, Mike Evans, anybody, as well as external free agents. So $50 million, it goes quick.
That it does. And appreciate that insight because, sometimes it gets a little tangled with what cap room is versus the actual cash, and things kind of like get mixed up a little bit in that category. So I appreciate you explaining it because sometimes I even get confused and I'm like, wait, is it this or is it that? So I think one of your brilliant talents is I always say this, like, again, to reference shows like I like to do. The Office, when he goes, explain this to me like I am 5. I think you do a great job of like explaining the cap to me and other people like we're 5 years old, which I appreciate. Let's stick on Mike though, because if Mike does come back, it's a little bit of a touchy subject because Mike was getting paid a lot of money last season. And I get it, like injuries and everything. His production came down a lot of it because of the injuries and the struggles of the offense, not necessarily Mike. Because we saw what Mike did when he came back against Atlanta in that Thursday night game. I believe he has a void year as well on his contract. So if he does decide to play, I would be shocked if it's anywhere besides Tampa Bay. Maybe there's a 5% chance it's the Houston Texans, given his hometown of Galveston and everything like that. But how does it look for Mike Evans and, what it might cost for him or it cost the team for Mike if he comes back another season?
Yeah, it's a great question. Mike has been over the $20 million mark for a few years now, but he's also going to be 33 when this next year starts. And he's coming off of a season where he just didn't have much production because of the injuries. As he gets older, you have to assume that injuries are going to be easier to pile up, even though the collarbone probably heals just fine. Mike's always had hammy issues that seem to knock him out of a couple games a year. So the big comp that I have for him is DeAndre Hopkins when he went to the Titans a few years ago. That was like $15 million a year, and you got to inflate for a higher salary cap. But I've got Mike right now somewhere between $17 and $20 million a year, probably on a 1-year deal. And I'm probably going to land somewhere around 18 million for him. So when he's on the field, he's worth 1.5 times that. It's just a matter these days of how much Mike Evans are you going to get. But I mean, he still looks great when he was on the field this year. He's still fantastic. So, and the biggest thing is he still tilts coverages, and you want somebody who can tilt coverages and open things up for other guys around you.
Oh, yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, even that first game of the season with Emeka Egbuka and his big play, 2 touchdowns and the touchdown at the end, that was all dictated by the Falcons putting all of that attention to Mike, which opened it up later in the season. I hope Mike comes back and plays. Man, it's just every time Mike gets hit, it looks like he's going to be down for the count like over and over and over. And more often than not, he gets back up. And that's why I think like when he got hurt in Detroit, it was such a shock because we've seen Mike get banged up before. And like, dude, I was holding my breath. Remember, he comes back against Atlanta. It was also Jalen McMillan returning. And Mike got flipped, like almost like Jalen McMillan did in Pittsburgh. But it's the same thing, like, well, different throw, but like a screen to Mike and he gets flipped. I hope Mike plays another season because, yeah, he's still got it, regardless of what the stats said at the end of the day. And even when he came back, like he had a big game against Atlanta and then his numbers kind of cooled off. But, I mean, every time the Bucs are in the red zone, they're still looking at Mike before anything else they try to do on offense.
I've got a pop culture reference for you that I don't think we've ever considered. But thinking about it, and this is going to age me a little bit, Mike is the Danny Glover to Baker's Riggs from Lethal Weapon.
So is Mike saying I'm too old for this?
He's every time he gets up from getting hit, he looks like, oh, I'm getting too old for this shit. And then Baker's the guy running around doing all the crazy shit. Like the character was Riggs, and why am I blanking on the actor?
Mel Gibson.
Mel Gibson, thank you. He's the Mel Gibson, just doing all sorts of crazy stuff out there, and Mike's just like, oh man.
I gotta get my 1,000 though. I gotta get my 1,000. That's like the end prize. So who's Joe Pesci in all of this then?
Who would be the Pesci? Oh man.
To be honest, I only remember the first Lethal Weapon. I don't think Joe Pesci comes until
he was in 2. He was in number 2, and then there all the ones after that. For me, it's Sean Tucker with the pleased. I am pleased posts all over social media. We just lost our 6th straight, but I'm glad you're pleased with your one carry for a touchdown. But
Marty Ebor says, great analogy. GM Reynolds Jr. says, Riggs, that was a brand new car. Bud Cannabis says, hell of an analogy. Another with it still is a new car. So, yes, we're a big reference show. Like I always make references, and Josh makes references as well. So when the two of us are together, it's just we're reference report. We're not even Pewter Report at that point. Got a couple super chats to get to. It does play into the cap and everything that we were talking about. We'll start with Grenalden. Thanks for the $1.99 super chat. Says any notable / realistic free agents for the Bucs. Let's say like not players that the Bucs will consider re-signing, even though Mike obviously is the big one out there. So we'll see.
It's hard to say at this point, just because you have this window up until when free agency starts in the middle of March, where a lot of teams are going to work to re-sign their own guys. With that said, some of the ones that I would be monitoring, I already said that linebacker is kind of the position that I really want to keep an eye on, and where I think the Bucs need to make a huge, not a huge splash, but certainly a notable improvement. And there's 3 names for me at that position. And I was just going through some linebacker projections in the last 48 to 72 hours. The 2 names that are going to headline that list are Nakobe Dean from the Eagles. Good chance Nakobe makes it to free agency, because the Eagles did just draft Jahad Campbell last year. And this is kind of how the Eagles work, is they like to draft a replacement a year before, so they don't necessarily have to re-sign everybody. So Dean likely makes it. There are some injury concerns with Nakobe Dean over the last few years, so something to monitor there. It should affect his valuation, but he should still be towards the top of the market for that position. Devin Lloyd is another one coming out of Jacksonville. It'll be interesting to see if they re-sign him. I think before
they didn't pick up his 5th-year option. Sorry, not to cut you off, but they didn't pick up his 5th-year option.
You're absolutely right. There's a lot of mechanisms to that, because the way the NFL designates certain positions for the 5th-year option, because he's considered a linebacker and they only consider all linebackers, the 5th-year option is priced based on pass rushing outside linebackers. So it makes it almost impossible for teams to use the 5th-year option on inside linebackers. You'll see this with Detroit this year. They are probably going to decline the 5th-year option on Jack Campbell, even though Campbell's coming off of a Pro Bowl year. I think did he make All-Pro? He might have.
He did. Yes, he did make All-Pro.
But the 5th-year option for him is going to be $25 million a year. For those of you who aren't paying attention, Fred Warner is currently the top of the market for inside linebackers at $21 million a year. Jack Campbell ain't that good, bud. That's part of the reason why Devin Lloyd's option got declined. But I've also heard rumblings that the new, like Liam Cohen and James Gladstone and Campanelli, they weren't huge on Devin Lloyd coming into the season. He's had a hell of a year. There's a good chance they probably like him a lot more now, so they may retain him. But if they don't, that would be another name that I would hope the Bucs are in on. But I'll tell you who I think's had a really fantastic season and wouldn't break the bank is Devin Bush from Cleveland. I thought he had a phenomenal season. He's actually who I'm going to be writing about tonight as a potential free agent target for the Bucs. Be writing that for Pewter Report. But he would be somebody that I think could warrant a good look, somewhere between $10 and $12 million a year, which is certainly very affordable.
We have a comment and a super chat from Fear Factor, so we'll read both. The comment was, what position do you see the Bucs spending the most money on in 2026? So that might be a little bit different than what you specifically want. And then thank you for this $1.99 super chat from Fear Factor. Says, what's the most likely use of cash spending in free agency?
Yeah, I think most likely use of cash spending would probably be about 40% of that $50 million that I've got estimated for free agents, probably on internal guys, if Mike comes back. So I would say Mike, and then probably another 12 million or so for 1 to 2 other players that are pending free agency. I think it's no secret among people who follow Pewter Report that I'm a big fan of Cade Otton, and I hope he's a part of their plans for next year. Just because I think that when Cade's on the field, you don't tip your hat on or tip your hand on what you're going to be running, whether it's run or pass. I think he's fantastic blocking that tight end, and he can do almost anything that you ask him to do from a schematic standpoint. So I'm a big fan of Cade, even though he's not explosive or a highlight reel guy. He's one of those guys who allows everybody else to do their job so much better. And then the other 60%, I think, would be on external. And I think there will be a heavy emphasis on the defensive side of the ball, especially because they're returning just about everybody on offense, again, with the exception of maybe Mike and Cade. And I think we all know that Rachaad White is looking for greener pastures. So, but you're bringing back almost everybody on offense. The defense did have some issues last year. So I do expect that's where they're going to spend a lot of money, mostly at linebacker, maybe at edge if there's somebody they like. But that's the thing. There aren't a lot of high-end players in the edge free agent market as of right now.
Right. Yeah, and like obviously Max Crosby is the big name. He's not a free agent, but you did a very in-depth story about why it's going to be quite difficult to trade for Max Crosby. But we've been talking a lot about the finances of the Bucs in this show. If you need to manage your own finances, there's nobody better to work with than the awesome people over at Immunity Financial.
Will your savings last through retirement? Most people plan for 10 years. A retirement can last 30. Healthcare, taxes, market swings, it all adds up. Take our quiz. Check your retirement readiness today. Immunity Financial.
Shout out to Immunity Financial. They have offices all across the United States. You can be here in Tampa, you can be in Atlanta, you can be in Oregon, Washington, all over the place. They can help you with a number of different financial needs. It could be helping to save for retirement. Could be annuities, sales and trading, setting up a college account for your kid if they want to go to college. So they got a little bit of something for everybody. And if you scan the QR code on the screen and take a 2-minute quiz, you can see how long your savings will last in retirement. So they're here to help. Check out Immunity Financial. You can go to immunity.com/retire if you're looking specifically for your retirement needs. But big thanks to Immunity Financial. Wanted to get back to earlier, Josh, you were talking about Baker, Tristan, a couple of guys, Winfield, I believe, came to mind as well, about players that the Bucs could restructure their deals to open up more space. And they won't do this until they are about to sign someone first. There's no reason to make all of these contractual moves until they're like bringing in either a tight end or an edge rusher or whatever the case may be. Who is either the most likeliest to get a restructure, or who's kind of like the easiest in terms of just less headaches when it comes to kind of restructuring?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the two most likely candidates, I would say, are the offensive tackles. And really what you're looking at when you're doing these restructures is you want to restructure the guys you see being here the longest period of time, because then you get to absorb those cap hits for years that they're actually playing. And so with Luke Gedeke, who just signed his deal last year, and with Tristan Wirfs, both of them are signed through 2029. I believe they're the signed for the longest period of time among all veterans, both of them set to be through 2029 or 2020 or 2030. So those would be the two that you would say we can restructure those. We feel really good about it. It's going to create a very small dead cap hit beyond the end of their contract if we decide not to re-sign them. So we can spread it out nicely. The ones that you're looking at, you hope you don't have to restructure is anybody who's nearing the end of their deal, because now you're talking about creating dead cap hits once they do move on, especially if you're not certain that you want to extend them, or anybody whose play has fallen off. So two players that I think are really kind of embody those two mentalities. Vita Vea has 1 year left on his deal. Yes, they could restructure his deal, but that's creating a large cap hit for 2027 when you don't know if he's going to be on the roster. And one of the things that I'll encourage fans to look at is the Bucs have not restructured Vita for a few years now. So this looks like something I want to say it started in 2023, if I remember correctly. They didn't restructure him in 2023. They definitely didn't restructure him in 2024. They didn't restructure him in 2025. So that to me says that the team is like, we want to see what Vita looks like when his deal is up. And if we need to walk away, we want to do it with the least impact to the salary cap as possible. That's not to say they won't re-sign Vita, but re-signing guys for their third contracts rarely works well in the grand scheme of things, especially for a guy who's, 330 some odd pounds in the best shape of his life. That's still somebody who could fall off fairly quickly. And so they just want to see what does he look like when he gets to the end of the deal? We don't want to make any assumptions. So that's that thinking. And then for somebody who, the play just wasn't that great last year, was Zion McCollum a year right after signing his new deal. If the Bucs don't restructure McCollum, they could walk away from his deal at the end of 2026. That's when all of his guaranteed money is up. And they could easily make Zion a cut candidate in 2027 if he doesn't bounce back from an admittedly poor 2026 or 2025.
And that's something that Tampa Bay does a lot, if I'm not mistaken, where if they do sign extensions or whatever the deal is, they typically like to put a lot more of the money kind of up front so they can kind of break away if need be in a situation like McCollum or, even like last offseason, Baker's money wasn't guaranteed going into this upcoming season, but then they decided to guarantee it as kind of like a good faith gesture.
Yep. Yeah. And since you brought up Baker, that's the other decision they have to make. I think everything from last summer was pointing to the team didn't want to touch his deal with 2 years left. It's a precedent they didn't really want to create. But at the same time, Baker's side was saying, hey, I'm coming off the best season of my life, arrow way up. We would like his side was probably looking to do an extension. And what Mike Greenberg and Jason Licht were able to say is, you know what, we're not ready to pull that trigger yet. So we will guarantee more of your unguaranteed money from 2026. That appeased Baker, but he's also coming off of a tough season. And whether you want to chalk it up to the injuries or the offensive line play, the bottom line is there was regression of the offense, and he's the biggest part of the offense, right? And do the Bucs want to extend Baker coming off of that type of season? I'm not sure they do, and that's just completely me looking from the outside. But if they do decide to extend him, and just based on last year, I think at the beginning of last year, I would have said he would have been around $55 million a year on an extension. By the end of the year, I would put that closer to 47. But if they do decide to extend him and let's say they settle at 50 million a year, he was due 40 million next year. So that extra 10, that's part of the 50 you have to spend. So you just took out 20% of your cash spending for somebody who is already on the roster.
I find this whole Baker situation absolutely fascinating because that was a big question, like as the season went on, like, is he a $50 million quarterback? Is he not? And I think part of this too, it doesn't even, obviously it impacts Baker, but some of it has to do with just some of these other gargantuan contracts that quarterbacks have been getting. And I'm never going to fault any player for going and getting their money, but Dak Prescott, who I think is a really good quarterback, but he's getting what, 65 million per season, or at least at one point was. The Cowboys didn't even come close to the playoffs this year. They were playing Christmas Day games, not like already mathematically eliminated from the postseason. Then there's always situations like Tua where they're never worth the money. And that's what makes it so difficult with Baker. It's like, hey, we want you to play well, but we also kind of like need a guarantee that you're going to consistently pay well, because we don't want to pay you $55 million for one good season of Liam Cohen when he was here with offensive coordinator. We kind of need it throughout your career here in Tampa Bay. And that's why, I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. Another thing that I've really thought about, and I guess this point doesn't make sense if the Bucs do just sign him to a contract extension. But if they decide that they're just going to let Baker play it out in 2026, it's not that this season for Baker doesn't matter, because it does. But ultimately, whether or not he continues to stay with the Bucs, it will be judged on what he does in 2026 versus what he did in 2025. It's almost like he'll be forgiven for 2025 and 2023 if he has a similar 2026 season like he did in 2024. Does that kind of make sense? Like this upcoming year, 2026, can override anything else he's done in Tampa Bay.
Oh, 100%, because he's shown with a competent organization, kind of his highs and his lows, right? And if you can find somebody who can get him consistently around his highs, then he's a top quarterback. He's a quarterback capable of taking that offense to the Super Bowl and winning it. So it's just a matter of, I think with Baker, it's reducing the lows. How much can you reduce the lows? If you can minimize that, which is what Liam Cohen helped him to do, obviously a more stable offensive line helped with that in 2024, and then they didn't. Yeah. They did have some wide receiver injuries, but not quite as bad as what they went through in 2025. That you can get all you need out of that quarterback, and if they can see that in 2026, the Bucs will absolutely sign up for a longer term extension with Baker. The other thing that proposition is really interesting, because you run the risk, if you don't do an extension for Baker in 2026, if he has a 2024 season, you're going to pay out the nose. You're basically looking at a top of the market quarterback extension. Yeah. Dak is the top, you mentioned earlier, at $60 million a year. Baker could easily at that point, especially with a cap that goes up for 2027, you're looking at somebody going, I want well over $60 million a year. So you run the risk there of, let's call it $17-18 million worth of opportunity cost if you don't re-sign him now, versus where I've kind of got him pegged. But the downside, if he has another poor season, the offense doesn't do anything, and they decide that Baker isn't the long-term option, if you extend him now you're waiting 2 to 3 seasons before you can get out from under the contract. And I would say the downside there outweighs the upside. I'd be happy to pay a top of the market extension if I have more confidence that Baker's that guy long-term.
Yeah, because, half the battle in the NFL is knowing that you have your quarterback. And if you have that, then you can build around a lot of other stuff. A fun fact about Baker Mayfield, he does throw with his right hand, but he golfs with his left hand. So definitely would recommend to Baker Mayfield to check out Heritage Isles if he hasn't already done so. It's a country club, but it's open to the public as well. One of the top-rated golf courses in Tampa and the Tampa Bay area, ranked in the top 3 best value courses in Tampa and St. Pete. You can sign up over at Heritage Isles on Golf Advisor, or give them a call at 813-907-7447. That's 813-907-7447. Baker throws righty and golfs lefty. I throw lefty and golf righty. Josh, do you golf?
I do. I throw and golf righty.
There you go.
I'm a simple man.
Very cool. Very cool. Couple other things we want to get to before closing out the show. First of all, need to give a huge thank you to our Pewter Platinum members. We're going to let their names scroll across the screen because there's so many of you, but we appreciate your support of PewterReport.com and Pewter Report TV. Going back to some of the finances and everything like that, is there anyone right now for the Bucs that could be eligible to part ways with his contract a year or two early in order to create more cap room for Tampa Bay?
Not any obvious choices. When you look at the veteran contracts that don't have guaranteed money, Vita Vea is kind of the one that stands out. But Vita's play, I'll put it this way. If Vita were cut, number one, that would leave a massive hole in the interior of the Bucs defense, especially with Kalijah Cansey, who hasn't shown he can stay healthy, right? Yeah. Number two, Vita's salary isn't that much. When you look at the defensive tackle market, he's being paid less than $20 million a year. And if he were to hit free agency, or if he were cut, I guarantee other teams would sign up to pay him $20 million or more per season. So that's really the only obvious one. I would have said Jamel Dean, but the Bucs did that last year by cutting off a year off his deal. And so he's set to be a free agent anyway. So there's not anyone that seems obvious to me as a cut candidate that would save cash or cap.
And then on the other side of it, last year was big with the extensions. Tristan Wirfs got one. Zion McCollum got one. Kate Otten famously did not get one. The year before, it was the Wirfs deal, and the Winfield deal comes to mind as well. Anyone that comes to mind for a potential contract extension at some point this offseason that Jason Light, Mike Greenberg, Jackie Davidson could be interested in making a deal with?
Yeah, so the early extension candidates would be the 2023 draft class. First round pick that year was Kalijah Cansey. With the injury he had, it's easier for the Bucs to use the 5th-year option on him, and it's a very reasonable number. I want to say it's around $14 or $15 million. Then your second round pick was Cody Mauch, who I think had a shot at an early extension before his injury this last year. So I think the Bucs probably just let him play out the end of his rookie deal and see how he comes back from injury. And then that leaves Yaya Diaby. Diaby would be somebody I think for most teams, they'd be looking at extending him. And if you look at his production on the whole, you're looking at somewhere around Greg Rousseau from the Bills or George Karlaftis from the, Kansas City, which is the low 20s. With where the Bucs are from a cash position and the other parts of the defense they need to address, I suspect that Yaya will not get an extension this offseason, and the Bucs will let him play out the last year of his deal.
What'd you make of Yaya's comments about, guys maybe not giving it their all and just kind of calling people out without, naming names specifically?
Yeah, I think it's him trying to take a step into a leadership role and say, we have to have more accountability as players. And that starts on Monday and rolls all the way through Sunday. So I don't have an issue with it. I think that it's a way for him to step up and take accountability for himself and his teammates. I'm also, just because I see the comments, the cough, just real quick, I'll address it. I apologize to everybody. Unfortunately, I got sick back in December, and my health is, when that happens, a cough remains for 6 to 7 weeks thereafter. Nobody is more annoyed by it than me. So
no, and I'm sorry too. I'm trying to throw a graphic while you're coughing, so it's
no worries. Hopefully, I've been able to hit the mute button, and all you do is just see it on the screen. But for those of you who have mentioned it, I'll just address it. So
getting ahead of it. Yeah. What does Michael Scott say? It's Creed accidentally gets it's a tattoo of a monkey in a graphic state with another, and the local news gets wind of it, and they're going to do a story. So Michael preemptively calls a press conference. So he says, you control the media, you control the story, or something like that. But it's the story would have never gotten out if he didn't call it the press conference in the first place. But anyway, 2 comments to get to real quick. Tony Taga says, trade scenario, hear me out. Baker, parentheses, 2-time playoff winner, and Todd Bowles for Matt's boy Justin Herbert, 6-time playoff joker, and Jim Harbaugh. Let's make it happen.
Oh, would you make that trade? You get Harbaugh.
Yeah, I would make it for Harbaugh. That would be the high. That would be the face that's going on the side of the stadium, not Justin Herbert. No, Justin Herbert's a good quarterback. I just think he's a little overrated with, he's the second coming of the biggest quarterback of all time with what he's done. But yeah, I mean, he's a good quarterback. I just don't think he's unbelievable like everybody ranks him up to be.
So can I give you a potential comp for somebody who is seen in the same light as Herbert for most of his career before going out on top, winning 2 Super Bowls in a row?
John Elway.
You got it. Right-handed Elway.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, once he proves it, I will tip my cap and say, hey, great job. But even Elway he lost a couple of Super Bowls too, if I'm not mistaken.
I think he lost 1 to Green Bay before coming back and winning 2. Did I have that backwards?
Yeah.
And he was in one early in the 80s, if I remember correctly. So
Yeah. Okay, sorry. I found the Michael Scott quote. It's alert the media and then you control the story. Wait for them to find out and the story controls you. Sometimes it's not a bad idea to get ahead of it. And then one other super chat from Fear Factor says, thank you for the $1.99 super chat. Says, does a replacement cost for Vita favor a trade?
not really, because he only has 1 year left on his deal. And that's where, that's another part of when teams consider trades is how long are you going to control the player? So that factors in a ton. So while Vita is a very valuable player and probably a little underpaid for what he does on defense, I would say his trade value would probably come in. I'm pulling up my charts here. Maybe a late third, probably a fourth rounder. So are you going to be able to replace everything that Vita does for you with a fourth round draft pick? The odds say no. They are not in your favor on that one.
What was the last thing I wanted to get to? All right. Chap the Champ says I'm a billion% in agreement with Matty Diamonds. We kid. Zach says sign to Kobe, trade a third for Herbig, and Messidor in the second. So
I think Herbig would cost more than a third. That's the.
I think so too.
Yeah, I think you're looking at a second, and Pittsburgh may even go for more.
By the way, Josh, I know your first account got stolen or hacked. Where can everybody find you on social media?
I'm mostly on Twitter, X, at Josh Queipo. Queipo is spelled not how it sounds. QUEIPO _ and then NFL. So that's where people can find me there. And then I do some writing about the league overall over at Fansided. And then fingers crossed, I've got something else in the works where you'll hopefully see more of my contract work on a bigger platform. The details on that to be determined.
Yeah, very excited for that. We'll keep that under wraps for now. You're also on with John Ledyard a lot.
Yes.
On John's podcast, talking about the Bucs. So that's always a treat when you two are on. And you have a lot of great stuff over at Pewter Report as well, with some great stories. The Sonny Styles article that came out, a couple other player profiles are coming up soon. There'll be one tomorrow morning. So always great stuff with Josh on. Tomorrow's show will be on at 4 o'clock again on Wednesday. And BA is coming on. Not Bruce Arians, but we love Bruce Arians, who's been on the show. Pewter Report's BA, Bailey Adams, also call him Bad Bailey, but I mean that in a good way. Pewter Report's BA, Bailey Adams, is on the show tomorrow as we have a Bucs coaching search update. We'll go a little more in depth about all the candidates, who's met with the Bucs, talk a little bit more about Todd Monken, and get Bailey's perspective on what's gone on thus far in this offseason, which has already been very intriguing, and it's only going to heat up even more when there's an offensive coordinator signing and some defensive coaches signed and a special teams coordinator signed. So there's still a long ways to go, but Pewter Report will be at the top of it when it comes to breaking down all of this news with your Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But that's going to do it for us today on the show. Huge thanks to Josh once again for joining us this afternoon. For Josh Queipo, I'm Matt Matera saying thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow at 4 p.m. for another edition of the Pewter Report podcast. Out.